Gavin Dance, welcome to the show. Thanks for making time for this. I'm excited to get into it. I'm just going to start with, of course, the big question that everyone is going to want to know. And I know that, there may be some things you can't talk about, but why did Tilian leave the band and what are your feelings on that?
Yeah, we just, it's like we said in our statement. It really came down to just, creative differences. And it wasn't like this huge event or like a big thing that happened, we just sort of decided as a group that it was time for a change.
Of course, people are going to ask, if the allegations and all that stuff was part of it.
Yeah, I think we made our statement pretty clear back in 2022 when all of that went down, and we backed that. We continued to tour with him, and we continued to do some amazing tours. Honestly, some of our best tours of our entire career after we had brought him back into the fold. And so we always wish him the best. I mean, we had a lot of amazing times with Tilian, and he's a super creative, super talented person. And I think just collectively, we were just headed in two different directions creatively as a group, and with him in his solo stuff. So,
got it. What kind of can you shed any light on what those creative differences might be, as far as like did he want to go in one more pop or less pop or any of that?
Yeah, I could say going into this new record that we've been working on, it's definitely a lot heavier. Kind of harkening a little bit back to our more experimental roots and going in different places that we haven't been able to really go in a little bit. And it feels like we're kind of able to do anything we want right now. And I guess that all I can say is it just felt a little restrictive for a while as far as our ability to experiment with different sounds. And it's been freeing, and we're really stoked on being able to put some of the heaviness and also like chaos back into the music.
Yeah, I mean, he's more of like a pop guy, if I understand correctly. Yes.
Yeah. And to add more to what Will was saying, we had written a whole record instrumentally, and then when we decided to change it up, we went back and actually wrote all new songs for the new release, because the other songs were catering more towards that pop A B song formula. So like Will said, we just wanted to get back to our roots with more progressive and experimental sounds.
So if the fans want more of the Wheelie Wheelies, then they're going to get it.
Yep. They want the Eagles. They're about to get them.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty rare. I mean, you guys have been a band for 15 years or something now. It's pretty rare for a band of that age to sort of be heavy again, which is the thing that fans seem to always ask for. So that sounds like they're going to be happy.
Yeah. We're coming up on our 20-year reunion next year. So
20 years.
We're at 19 years thus far.
Got it. Well, in sort of the wake of all of this stuff, there were a lot of people who were asking if you're going to bring Johnny back. And I personally think that would be interesting. Is that something you'd ever consider doing, even for a couple shows or like a tour of his album? I'm sure it would definitely make a crazy amount of money for you guys, and people would love it.
I'd say never say never. I like Johnny. I think he's a crazy talented vocalist. I think he's obviously made a lot of he's done a lot in recent that's been towards recovery, and he's been sober for a while now. It's really cool to see him back on the redemption arc, and I would never say never.
Yeah, but I do think our focus right now is on what we're currently working on, this current group, seeing where we can take things. Like, we're really happy right now as far as just the energy and working together and kind of all being on the same page. And we'd love to just take that energy to the shows and put that out on a new record, and see how far we can take things, because I think this is like the most just stable and fun that the band's been in a really long time, if ever.
So what's the status of that album? Is it like done or in progress or?
All the instruments are done, and they're gonna start doing vocals here in the fall. Am
Okay.
I correct? Am I right?
Yep. Yeah. November, December, John and I go in to do vocals for all of these new tracks.
Got it. Do you have a release date or anything in mind yet?
Not yet. We usually like to have all our ducks in a row, have the masters ready, send them over for vinyl pressing, and get the visual elements all in a row. There's been like a really cool resurgence with visual elements, I feel like lately, where music videos kind of took a back burner for a while. It wasn't really that creative. And then you have, Ronnie dropping these huge production music videos that are just doing very well. They're great visual representations. So I think we'd like to explore some of those opportunities and then and get that going. But we are planning a headliner around it, hopefully for the spring. So
Okay.
Yeah, it's all in the works right now.
Well, your last few videos, maybe in the last, I don't know, year or two or something, have been like really impressive. Was that something that like you made a deliberate effort to kind of invest in that, or did it just happen organically? Or tell me about that.
I would say yes. I think that collectively as a band, we again, you know how the industry is. Sometimes it's like what's going to work, what's the next thing,
Yep.
what can we invest in? Music videos, they're out, let's get this thing. I think we've always stuck true to believing that visual representation, it's timeless, it's forever. And I think that we all collectively have some type of hand in the creative process usually when it comes to videos, and so we're pretty intentional about what we try to accomplish there.
Yeah, and I think looking back over the last several years when we started making the good quality kind of satirical videos with a guy named Sam Helene, we realized that those had the most views and the most reaction out of our fans, and not everything comes down to like views and money and shit like that.
But it has to some extent. It's gotta make financial sense.
Totally. We're career musicians at this point in our lives, so absolutely. But we feel like we're in a position too, though, where we could still have fun and still cater to our fans, in an artistic way, and try and give people what they like and what we like too. We like to laugh, and we definitely don't take ourselves too seriously. So.
And I'd also say, on top of that, despite our chaotic history as a band, we actually are pretty loyal. And we worked with Sam Helene for years and kind of developed a style of video with him. And he grew as we grew, and they just kept getting better and better. And we've had a videographer working with us for a few years now, and he's upped his game on what he's able to do as a music video maker. And we started working with him on our most recent videos, and those turned out great too. So a lot of just developing talent around us and giving people who have been with us for a long time a shot, and it's been paying off.
I always really like it. There's a thing that happens a lot with bands where they sort of leave the people that brought them to the dance. You know what I mean? They get to a certain level and they start switching up, the video directors they work with and go to different producers and blah, blah, blah. And I feel like that is almost always a bad idea.
I would agree. Yeah. I mean, it seems a lot. Sometimes you can forget what got you there. And,
Yeah.
and all these people, have been a part of our team for a really long time. And when it comes to doing new projects, we always think of them first. And of course, like you said, things have to make financial sense. Sometimes the label will want some variety, and we have to think outside the box and work with some people we maybe wouldn't have normally chosen. But that's all just part of it, and we try to maintain as much control over that stuff as we can.
Are you going back to Chris Crummett for this one?
Yes. Yeah.
So you've worked with him on everything,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, I wanted to mention that too, because you had mentioned, when bands deviate and they try new producers, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Oftentimes, Chris has been such a vital part of DGD sound. When people think of iconic DGD records, they're usually resonating with records like Mothership or Downtown Battle Mountain, and Chris has been such an integral part of that. I was definitely a strong advocate vocally to try to go back with him in the fall, and all the instruments we did with it was kind of a mishmash between Chris and then the guitars and bass we did with a guy named Stephen Hawks, which him and Chris are best friends. They grew up and they created Interlace Audio together on the come up in Portland, so they've worked hand in hand. So they're kind of like peanut butter and jelly. It's like a
I mean,
really good
Chris is
collaborative.
just so fucking good at this particular style too. I mean,
Oh,
like there's literally nobody on the planet, in my opinion, that like does this style better than him.
I
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah, he's aside from our album Acceptance Speech, I've recorded drums for every album with him. And we were actually talking when I was just up there tracking that I've recorded well over 200 songs with him at this point. And it's just like you said, he's just so good and captures the sounds that I want. That, you know, we've talked about trying to work with different guys, and that's, I don't know, we just jive so well together. So I will continue to work with him.
And you know, I've heard lots of his like raw tracks, and like his unmixed recordings sound better than a lot of people's finished mixes. Like he's just
100%.
he's insane.
Yeah, he's got a vision from start to finish where he just kind of knows where he wants everything to sit sonically. When I've recorded with other people, it seems like you record and then they figure out how to fit it all together in mixing.
Exactly.
Chris, like everything is already kind of where it needs to be, and he's always getting better too. Like every time we go in, it's like we get the guitar tone or drum tones, and we hear him, and I'm like, well, this is the best you've ever done. You know, he's always learning, adding to his studio. Like just very dedicated guy, and we've definitely grown with him.
Yeah. Well, so you mentioned sort of the chaotic history of the band. I was like looking on Wikipedia, you know, at the band history timelines of these bands, and I like to count how many lines there are. I don't know how many there are for Dance Gavin Dance, but it's a lot. But it's, you know, you've had this situation where you've replaced a vocalist. I guess this is the fourth one, or you know, third or fourth time now, which usually destroys a band. But in the case of Dance Gavin Dance, I feel like you guys just keep getting bigger every time. Why do you think you've been able to pull that off where other people haven't?
I'm not sure, but I feel like we definitely have always had a real focus on staying true to our sound, not trying to be anything for anybody else. And we are kind of, you know, we have all kinds of influences, including like fusion jazz bands from the 70s and stuff that we're constantly always changing members.
Right.
And we feel almost like we've been that, but for this scene in a way that other bands haven't, where we've been able to constantly be moving things around. But every time we incorporate somebody new, we just try to play to their strengths and become like, with our music and our image and everything, a sum of all the parts. And it's just works. We've been lucky, you know, to have great people to work with, and you know, it's hard to explain how it's worked, but you know, we're very grateful.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think too, a big factor is, you know, every time we've made a change with a singer or whatnot, people in the industry or fans, you know, sort of doubt like the new era of the band. And so we're constantly like, well, we got to prove them. We got to give it all like full 100% effort and try and do better than we did on the previous releases. So we're always pushing ourselves like to the limit to create the best music that we can.
I think it's kind of a rare situation where the fans are into the whole thing, like the lore, and you know, like each one of you, like they're fans of everybody in the band and just sort of the vibe as a whole, and the community also, to where, you know, I don't know, I just feel like that's such a rare special thing as opposed to most bands. It's sort of, you know, frontman plus other people. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah. I wanted to comment just briefly on this too, because I mean, these three guys here have been at it for 20 years almost, right? These guys have been at it for a very long time. I was very fortunate, super grateful to come in at almost the 10-year mark. Basically on the 10-year tour was my first tour with the band as a touring guitar player, and getting integrated into the fold and being a fan before. That's how I perceived it. It was I got super into the lore right away. I picked up Downtown Battle Mountain 1 from my local FYE and was like, man, this guy can sing his ass off. And I just got super into all the lore. And so coming into the band and getting to this extent for the last 10 years, I've always loved that methodology of like that view that's kind of larger than life. It's the sum of all the parts. And I think that it was what resonates most with our diehard fans and continues to grow that from the ground up.
That community aspect to me is like such a special, it almost reminds me of like a jam band, like in a good way.
Yeah.
Do you get those comparisons at all?
Definitely. I think that's kind of how we're trying to reframe the band in a lot of ways, is instead of, it's not just singer and band, it's a collective, and it is kind of a jam band. And it's another thing creatively where we really wanted to continue to collaborate with more people, more vocalists, more guitar players, more songwriters, just like you would if you were in the Grateful Dead or Fish or any of these old school jam bands. They were always looking for new players and prodigies to bring on into the fold and keep it fresh and creative. It's something I've always loved in dance and something I'm really looking forward to in the new era.
There's that community aspect too, where it feels like there's a lot of people who are into the band because like they go to the shows because they want to see their friends, not just the band, which I think is a pretty cool thing that I don't see very often.
Yeah, I think that the community that's built around the band's been awesome. I think maybe one of the attractors to that too has been that the band, while we do tackle serious subject matter, we also have like a tongue-in-cheek aspect to it that makes it a little bit more comfortable. I think it's not always like full on doom and gloom or full on like emo angst. There's all kinds of stuff, including at times almost like comedic things that I feel like that creates like all kinds of feelings to attach to. And that was also something that we were aware of starting the band, was that everybody in this scene was very, very serious. And
Yes.
while there's a lot of serious things to sing about and talk about, there's also a whole other side to humanity, and we wanted to kind of showcase everything. And that it's tough, but we try to take that on to expand in like all directions.
It's interesting how many bands, and we'll call it whatever, like alternative music, whatever, like only want to show one side of the human experience, which is usually like being sad or angry. But I mean, I don't think most of us walk around feeling one emotion 24/7.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. I haven't really considered that thought before, but like Will said, I'm glad that we could capture the other side of humanity and other emotions that people feel.
And I think a lot of people are like, they feel like if they show the sort of fun side of it, that somehow that undermines their credibility as like serious musicians or something. And I don't really think that's true at all. I mean, again, like people are multifaceted, complex, creatures. And, if anything, to me, it's sort of more simplistic if your art only has sort of one tone to it.
Yeah, it becomes one dimensional rather than trying
Right.
to capture all of the nuance that goes into life. I mean, like, it's so complex. I totally agree.
I think like, Johnny Frank with Bill Murray, I think does a really good job of that, of having like, a lot of his lyrics are very like sort of kind of sad and, reflect, pretty serious mental health issues, but his videos are funny and he's riding a lawnmower and like it works, like you're like, well, laughing through the pain.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I'll have a country solo rip through the bridge just to kind of add brevity to it. Yeah, that guy does it really well.
I feel like that's sort of, to me, the next frontier of you mentioned Ronnie also, is people being just like post genre. And I think you guys could do it too. Like if you put out like whatever, a death metal song or something, I don't think anyone would think that's weird. They'd probably think it was cool.
Yeah, I mean, that's
the
really
goal, man. Like we definitely try to explore everything, and like we sat down on the last record, like, well, let's write the heaviest song ever. Let's tune down crazy lower than we've ever done, and see what happens. And me and Andrew were like, let's write a funk song in drop A.
Totally.
I don't know if it's ever been done.
That one turned out
we have
well, I mean, Issues kind of did that a little bit, but I'd like to hear more of it.
We'll go for
But
stuff
yeah,
like
just
that.
constantly trying to challenge ourselves to hit those extremes.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's cool that fans are accepting of that now in a way that, I mean, I remember whatever, maybe even 10 years ago, but certainly 15 or 20 years ago, it's like you could only like one thing. Like you had to like this kind of music, and anything outside of that was off limits. And it's not like that anymore. I mean, Bring Me the Horizon is another great example of that. They switch genres like every song in Ronnie. You know, he's got whatever, like basically a deathcore song, and then his next song is like pop country, and and nobody thinks anything of it, which is awesome. Like artists have permission to experiment now in a way that I don't think they did before.
Yeah, I think that. Oh, you can go, Matt.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think that's been a huge part of the Gavin Dance is not being limited to one genre, and always and since the conception of the band, experimenting with different types of music, and that was kind of like what we sought out to do, was to not limit ourselves to just one sound.
Yeah, and I think it's had a both positive and negative effect for the scene overall. Like, um, things were easier to find back when we started. Like like you said, emo bands were emo, and heavy bands were heavy, and I think that was simple and easy to understand, and it created these local scenes where people could find each other because there were so few types. But as times gone on, I think things have kind of changed, and those scenes and the strict boxes that everybody in those were in have kind of fallen away. And now there's more room for niche bands that are willing to explore all kinds of different landscapes. And that's more what is, I think, people are craving, as opposed to what they were craving like 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, and you guys have done such an amazing job of being a relatively niche band, but putting up like very respectable numbers. And I think that's just such an interesting moment in time now, is that you can have a great career doing stuff that's quote unquote, not commercial.
Yeah, and I mean, it used to backfire for us. Like we had a hard time getting put on tours. We were always headlining because other bands were like, we don't get this band. We don't know what kind of music this even is. So we wouldn't get any radio love or anything like that. And it's definitely changed and shifted over the last few years.
Well, I think that's because you created your own thing. You have your own scene, and if people want to be part of that, that's cool, but I don't think you need anybody else.
Yeah, Matt, I remember when we put out Happiness, we wanted to put out Don't Tell Dave, which is like a funk song, like as a single, and we did, and people were like, what, this isn't what DGD sounds like, is this gonna be the whole record, blah blah blah. And it's just like, whoa, like we experiment with all kinds of stuff. It doesn't have to all be one thing. Like once the record comes out, you'll see that there's different styles, and that's something we battled every time we put out singles, is um people are going to judge what they think the whole record's going to be like off of one song. And our goal is always making a record that's all over the place, so one song can't represent the whole album. And that's been a thing that I think fans have gotten a lot better at understanding and used to be really confused by.
Yeah, I feel like your fans now just sort of understand that they're going to get whatever they're going to get, and that's it's like it's a beautiful potpourri.
Yeah.
So in addition to the kind of vocalist changes, the other thing that you had to deal with, unfortunately, was losing Tim right around the same time that you were releasing the album, and during the time the Tilian stuff was going on, which to me, I mean, if I was in your shoes, I don't know that I would have kept going. I might have just been like, you know what, this is like, enough's enough. What kept you guys going in that situation?
For Tim passing, I know Tim was a very, very dedicated member to this band and loved music more than anything. And the last thing that he would have wanted was us to just say, fuck it, the show must go on. And I think that we're all very confident that that's what he would have wanted. And we had the blessing from his family as well to do that. And they urged us that we should do the tour and go on with the release as planned. And that's the best way that we could honor him.
So was that ever like a discussion of whether you were going to keep going, or you just all sort of understood that this was going to keep being a thing?
Uh, there was never a discussion, if we were going to break up. It was a discussion if we should do the tour, how we're going to do the release now. That definitely was discussed. But I think, and I can only speak for myself, but I have dedicated all my adult life, to Dance Gavin Dance. And these changes and things that happen, for me personally, don't deter me. I'm super grateful for this band, and no matter what happens, I'll persist and try and rally with all these guys as much as we can to continue on.
Yeah, and I'm right there with Matt. There wasn't any like feeling like we were gonna break up, but as far as doing that tour, I was really on the fence, and it really took talking to Tim's mom and her being like, he would want you to guys to go do this, and that was really what got me to keep moving on there. But Tim was just such a talented guy, and people didn't realize he was always working on his recording skills. Like, he was becoming an amazing recording engineer, and I could see him having gone into producing and making some awesome things. And yeah, for that talent to just go away like that was, very devastating. And for me personally, like, continuing on and keeping him in my memory and dedicating myself as much as he was dedicating himself to his craft is the best way I could see to, pay homage to him.
Well, I feel like at this point, Dance Gavin Dance has sort of entered this tier of bands where I think you guys can do whatever you want for as long as you want. I would say, Converge would be another one of those bands where you sort of, probably never going to be number one on Billboard, but you have like a lane of people who are going to love whatever you do forever, which I feel like, for every musician, that's kind of the dream.
It gives us a lot of freedom, but also a lot of responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility. So, I don't ever want to take that for granted. I feel really grateful that we've developed such an awesome fan base, and every time that we go into doing anything as a band, I think we're all on the same page of like, we have that responsibility to make sure that we put 100% into it.
And are you guys still doing Swanfest?
Yeah, we postponed it this year because of the change in the band and the tour that we're doing in the fall with Falling in Reverse. So we postponed it, but no, it's still definitely going to be a thing. There'll definitely be more info to follow about that soon, probably around the same time we end up announcing that spring tour with the album and whatnot. So definitely a lot of good stuff to come.
Is that any harder to do logistically now? I guess maybe not, because it isn't a tour, but is that harder to do now than it was, a couple years ago? I hear everyone saying how much harder it is to do, any kind of show now.
I mean, as hard as it is to do any type of tour now, I feel like it's all the industry continues to morph and shift with all sorts of inflationary costs. I mean, even transit now for buses and bandwagons, the pay structures have changed, the cost of goods sold has changed. So yeah, and so obviously you would imagine the scale of that would change with it, the scale of doing a festival versus a tour, the logistics involved. So yeah, I would say it's tougher to run those types of things than before, but we have a great team. Super grateful for the team that we have with Dance Gavin Dance, everybody on our label side, on our management side, that are very competent and very confident in providing a great festival lineup for next year. So
yeah, I think the most challenging part about it is just trying to make it the same but different from the previous years, like just throwing different bands on, but not breaking the mold too much for what we sought out to do in the first place, which was have a festival for a lot of bands that don't normally get to play all the big rock festivals in the country. But then still incorporate some of the, so it's definitely some juggling.
Well, I think it's cool for the reason you said, because so many festivals have the same bands headlining, and I understand why. It's, they got to sell tickets. That's business. I get it. But to me, I look at all those and most of them are kind of just the same thing, just in a different place. And when I see Swanfest, it's something like, very clearly different. Like you guys have your own point of view. And like that reminds me of the kind of stuff that you would see, whatever, like 15 years ago or something like that, when all these tours like had their own identity.
Yeah, I feel like yeah, the selling tickets is important, but I think that sometimes things are played a little too safe, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of genres and subgenres in rock that don't get asked to play those festivals, but they still have bands that have fans that, and these are growing genres that deserve to some respect and some listeners, and to be able to showcase some of those bands along with ourselves, I think expands, the just rock in general, and creates more opportunities, and hopefully inspires musicians to experiment with different sounds. And without that kind of push, and taking those kinds of risks, I think things become stagnant. And
Mm-hmm.
part of doing our own festival was that it seemed a little stagnant, and we wanted to put something out there that was a little out of left field and kind of just flavored differently. And so far, we've really been happy with how they've turned out.
So it sounds like the headline here, just like last question before I let you guys go, seems like the headline here is basically like, I don't want to say business as usual, but this is the story for the band in general, is there's always like speed bumps and twists and turns, but Gavin Dance is going to keep being Gavin Dance from what I'm hearing.
Yeah. I
Yep.
mean, yeah, we're just going to keep trying new things, keep pushing the boundaries, keep touring. We got a couple cool, releases coming up, new graphic novel, a new fan club app. And it's kind of like you said, for reals. I mean, business as usual.
Yeah, if
For
not
whatever that
better.
means for you
Like
guys.
I'm looking really forward to this new record. Like I'm super proud of the directions that we're taking. And yeah, I mean, I think maybe the best is yet to come.
When people say that, usually means we're going to make a butt rock album, but I don't see that coming from you guys.
No.
Maybe
Right, well,
one butt rock song.
just one. Yeah. Cool. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks. And I'll look forward to the album.